Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the sound bites. Next to me is Ben Kinsley, who is the principal of Imperium Advisors, Inc. I got it. Inc. That's what it says.
Sure.
Yeah, Ben is co-host and sponsor of the program, so we thank him greatly.
Of course.
Tattoo company?
It is, exactly. Inc.
Apparently,
Inc.
I guess so.
Aren't you an Inc. or not?
We
have to get this right.
That's a good question. No, it's an LLC.
Oh, it's an LLC? Well,
yeah.
Forget the Inc., it's LLC. And our guest tonight is Guy Page, who's the publisher of just about everything you read in Vermont. He's got 3 publications, 2 are out, and 1 is coming in January.
That's right.
You have the Vermont Water Cooler, which I love that name, the Vermont State House Headliners,
right.
And coming soon in January, the State House Chronicles.
Chronicle of the Vermont State House.
Chronicle of
Yes.
Vermont State House. I'll get it right. That's cool. Can you talk a little bit about yourself, Guy, and also maybe clarify what each of these publications do?
I live in the great town of Berlin.
Yes.
Or Berlin, as I guess some of the
Berlin. You better get it right.
That's
I've had
right.
some doors slammed in my face because I didn't say that.
Pat
right.
is also from Berlin.
Berlin.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm a Vermont native, went to UVM, and I've been in journalism and in lobbying really pretty much all my life. And right now, I decided I was getting tired of being a lobbyist and that I really missed journalism. And mostly I missed pitching stories to journalists and having them say, yeah, that's a great idea. But they would always go, nah, they weren't very interested. And it was then I realized that if anyone was going to write these stories, which to me were really important, it was going to have to be me. So I started State House Headliners, I think about 2 years ago now, 2.5 years ago. And been doing that, writing a column 3 or 4 times a week. Today's column was on, of course, today is Indigenous Peoples Day.
Right.
And I wrote it on that Vermont's Native Americans have the highest suicide rate of any ethnic group in Vermont.
Oh, that's really tragic.
It is, and there's, especially apparently in Grand Isle County for some reason, I'm not sure why, but the Vermont Commission on Native American Affairs is looking into it and trying to develop a strategy about that. So I thought instead of looking at the whole Columbus thing, I'd look at something that I don't think anyone else is looking at, which is how are Native Americans doing today? And also, Vermont's terrible history. Do you know that the Native Americans who tried to live in the traditional way, the migratory patterns,
Right.
they were mistaken by George Perkins, the eugenicist.
Yep.
They were mistaken as traveling gypsies who were, stealing everything.
Oh, wow.
This was back in the 20s, and someone passed a law that said that children of these quote-unquote rovers could be taken away by the state, and they were, putting into reformatories, and a lot of them sterilized.
Oh, here in Vermont?
Yes, here in Vermont.
Please.
You and I, Pat, grew up with the Weeks Reformatory and the Weeks School and the Brandon School.
Right.
That's where they were sent.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes, and up until I think the late 40s, maybe even the early 50s, some of that was going on.
Wow.
And
I remember the Brandon School because I was helping close the Brandon School when I was Commissioner of Personnel, and it was some of the people that lived there were just, it was so heartbreaking.
Yes.
It's terrible.
Yes.
But that's another show.
Another show.
So I try to take an angle that maybe no one else is looking at and write about it, and that was, as an example, that was today's.
Well, can I just, as long as we're talking about the Indigenous People Day, I was trying all day to write on Facebook my question, but I was afraid I couldn't figure out how to word it without setting off a diatribe of 26, 36 comments.
Sure.
We picked this day because of Columbus Day.
Yes.
We didn't pick it because there was something important to the Indigenous people to help celebrate today, correct? So did we do anything today in recognition of their contributions, recognition of their history and what they've done? Was anybody doing anything?
Tomorrow, this is also was in my story, tomorrow at UVM from 10 to 7 at the Davis Center, there'll be drums, music, film, just sort of cultural stuff.
Great.
And I think that's probably not the only thing like that. I think there has been an attempt to to recognize at least the past and the culture and the traditions of
Right.
Native Americans in
Well,
Vermont.
I hope so, because we did a show. We had a chief of one of the 4 tribes, and we had the chair of the commission, and it was a great
Right, I
show.
bet.
Oh, it was, and they encouraged me, and I haven't done it yet, but I'm planning to do it, to have a show on their language, about how their language formed and how it relates almost everything to the earth. And I'm going to do that because that show was very interesting to me. And we got a lot of hits, so I'm sure it was interesting to viewers.
But I think it's really, really interesting, of course, because everyone's, all news outlets over the weekend. And today I've been talking about, Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples
Right.
Day and, the reasons for renaming the holiday. And one of the ones that really kind of struck a chord with me, I guess, was this comment from a woman who is part of I think the Cherokee tribe, or the group of tribes,
Yeah.
and she's kind of does PR for them. And she said, it's as simple as, when you're growing up in school and they tell you Columbus discovered America, and that right there is as simple as it is the problem,
Right,
because
right.
the way that we refer to it, even the way that we think about it, right? Columbus discovered America, well, or the continent of America, and but it wasn't lost. It wasn't, it was discovered
there were
by
people living
there
here.
were people living
Yeah.
here, right? It wasn't like it was, a totally new continent that was uninhabited.
Right.
And, there were people living here that had, for hundreds, if not thousands of years,
Right.
and it was discovered by Westerners. And that's the key
That's right,
distinction. It was the Western civilization, and Europeans discovered
And
it.
we did not treat them too well
And
either.
we did not treat them too well.
Say the
We did
least.
not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that was good. Good discussion. We should do something about that, have them back. It was great. Anyway, today we've asked Guy here because we want to particularly talk about education. Is that we could start there. Sure. But I also, a little bit later on, we're going to talk a little bit about the other subjects that Guy hits upon on his in his writings, because they're just agriculture, housing, education, all this stuff, Guy. You really, where do you get all this stuff? Because they're not even in the legislature. And
Well, the legislative website has all this information. There's always meetings going on.
Well,
Like,
that's
I think
true,
next
that's
week
true.
there's one on Vermont forests and climate.
Right.
Last week it was doing even more about the plastic bag ban, going beyond the law. And so every week there's some legislators up at the
Right,
State
right,
House
doing something.
trying to make life better / making mischief, whichever you prefer.
Right.
And so there's always something going on in that building. And the internet is, you can Google in 3 words and up pops 3 or 4 story ideas.
Right,
It's an amazing
right.
thing.
yeah, it is. Well, you do such a great job, especially the way you write, because I can understand it. And my clue is if I have to go back and reread it, like one of our guests, I always have to reread his stuff a couple of times. I won't. He hasn't been on this year. Last year he was on a lot. I always have to reread it, but it's because I don't quite get it the first go around. So anyway, let's just start out with I guess good old Act 46. And can you give us a status of where it is, what's happening? We
Sure.
just, as we were sitting out in the lobby here, we just read an article in the Waterbury.
Right. Waterbury Record?
Record, yeah.
About Harwood and all the things they have to face. Do they close? Do they open? It's a great big article. So
Well, there's no
it's-
real schools near them either. They're
No.
kind of out there. I mean, what would be the next biggest school from Harwood? Like Bristol? Is that
Oh
the next one
no!
over?
My God, that would be. You want to worry about kids driving over the mountains in the
Well,
winter?
or you come back to
Oh,
Waterbury.
I don't think so. Yeah.
That's a problem. There's a district in Addison County that they're talking about merging Cornwall, which is almost down by the lake,
Right.
not quite, next one over, with all the way east to Hancock and Ripton, which are like up in the mountains and
Right,
over.
right.
Yeah, that's like
right.
past Starksboro even.
Right.
Yeah.
In easterly direction. So it's a terrible situation where it's not exactly flat there. It's not like maybe some places in Franklin County where there's 4 or 5 towns all right together, and it's not like that at all. And most of Vermont isn't like that. We're a town of haulers. You
Yeah,
know?
that's right.
And our school system was built up on that. So
Well, I moved into
it's tough.
Bristol when I first came here, and when I worked for the state, I had to go over the app gap, and I wouldn't wish that on
That's
anybody.
terrible.
I mean, seriously.
Don't they close that in
hate
the
it.
winter?
No, that's the one in Stowe. They don't close app gap; it still goes. But
Really?
yeah, you can
should.
They
make
should
it.
close that
You
road.
can make it down the downhill
Yeah.
very quickly sometimes if you're not paying attention.
Because you go past like Mad River Glen is
Yeah,
off
right,
of
right.
that.
Yeah, it's
and
great.
There's like that big cliff.
You see the tops of the trees as
Yeah.
you're going down.
Is that how Jim Douglas would travel up
Every
here?
day, every
Oh.
day. Do you know, we
That's
have too much to
dedication.
talk about tonight, but there was a van that the state provided. And all the people from Bristol, I couldn't ride it because the job, you never knew whether you'd never get out at 5 o'clock.
Sure.
You know, it was always something, so I had to ride. But they had a thing they called the App Gap Shuffle. To get the van over the mountains without skidding, people would have to leave their
No.
seats and get in the back to put the weight. I'm kidding you. I mean, I'm not kidding you. But, so they called it the App Gap Shuffle. So somebody would yell out App Gap Shuffle, and everybody jumped to the back and put weight in the back.
Put weight on the back. 'Cause you have to
I said to them when they asked me, I said, "And I have to pay for this?" I said,
Wow.
"No, that's okay, thanks."
Yeah.
I think I'll pass.
I'll take my own
Wow.
car.
I'll take my own car,
I'm good.
exactly. Anyway, it's
That's
scary.
funny.
So,
love it.
so what are you hearing back from all the schools and things as the dust sort of settles?
Sure. Well, it's just really happening on two levels. First, there's the Supreme Court level, and then there's the district level.
Right.
At the Supreme Court, David Kelly and a few other lawyers have filed suit. It's gone through various levels of the court system, and he told me a few days ago he believes his case is really strong. And what he's really saying is that Act 46 did not give the State Board of Education the authority to force a merger.
Right.
And the State Board said, well, yes, it did. So I guess some judge or panel of judges will need to be.
Well, there's another layer to that because some in the legislature say that they did as well, but there's a secondary argument to that the legislature doesn't actually have the authority to cede that power to an unelected state board, which is key because the first draft of Act 46, when it passed the House, actually had a provision in it that required the State Board of Ed to come back with a merger map, and the legislature would then vote on it.
Okay.
And they didn't do that.
Because the legislature, per the Vermont Constitution, has the authority to create and disband municipalities, and also change the charter of municipalities. See these every year, Guy. You're in the legislature. You get, Burlington wants to change their charter. Middlebury wants to change their charter. These have to go through the legislature to get approved.
Right.
Well, school districts are municipalities. So in order to create or disband a municipality, it has to go through the legislature. That is the first point that they were contending. The second point is that even if the legislature did actually transfer that authority in this one instance to the State Board of Ed, do they have the authority to do that under the Vermont Constitution?
Well,
Which is why this is a constitutional argument.
Wouldn't that be amazing if they found out, no, you don't?
One of the other wrinkles when you mention municipalities, Ben, is several towns have either passed or are looking at non-citizen voting.
Burlington is one of them.
Right,
Yep.
and I believe Montpelier,
Yes,
they
they
voted
did.
on it, but the legislature didn't take it up last year,
Right,
I think.
right.
And one of the reasons that would be limited to only the city side and not the school side is because we have all of these mergers.
Right.
So it'd be one thing if Montpelier had all of its own schools, Montpelier High School, Montpelier
Right.
Kindergarten, and then they could allow their non-citizens to vote, but they certainly can't in a merged school district or unified school
Right, and that
district.
also doesn't apply for federal elections. So it's only
Yeah, it's only local.
Only local, so it's your mayor
Right.
and your town budget basically is all you get to vote on.
Right.
And there's usually a few special questions that come up.
Bond votes and things
right,
like
bond
that.
votes,
yeah. Yep.
So anyway, there's that little wrinkle too. So my understanding from Mr. Kelly is that the next sort of decision time by the Supreme Court will be in November, sort of the next level. I don't think that would be like the final. They have to go through a bunch of back and forth, and And November is sort of like the next big deadline.
Yeah, I think November
And
is
that
the
for
next
the-
set of
for the
oral
courts,
arguments for the
That's
Supreme
what it
Court.
is.
Yeah,
Right.
at the Supreme Court?
Supreme Court.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Vermont
it's at the
Supreme
Supreme Court.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
'Cause it went through district court in Franklin County, and it's now in the
Right.
Supreme Court.
But they didn't do well in any of those levels, though. I mean,
Well, it only went through one level. It only went through the district
Because I
level.
remember David, I mean, somebody should give that guy a medal. Honest to goodness, he has spent more of his personal time for no cost to anybody to fight this, as the other, I think there's 2 or 3 other attorneys
Yeah.
too. Somebody, even
That's
if,
right.
God forbid he loses, but even so,
and he has-
somebody should recognize his achievements.
He has, what, 38 school districts? Something like that. Some ridiculous number. 38
Yes.
school districts
That
that are
is-
behind him.
Yeah,
That's right.
Um,
And he's a he's current or at least former school board chair.
Yes,
So,
yeah,
and this is
right,
really
right.
why he got into this.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because I don't think he has any kids in the school system, but he's been so involved over the years.
Yeah.
And he's, he's just a very sharp guy. But
Yeah,
anyway.
he is.
So do you think they're going to do, I mean, besides what David's doing on the local, are they going to come up to the State House and say, this isn't working, or are they going to create a little bit of a stink up there?
I know there's some talk about that. However, the House Education Committee was very adamant and really stood firm last year. So there's some sort of wish to do that, but also real questions about how much good it would do
Right.
to
Yeah.
approach that in the legislature again. So it's something that's happening on the grassroots. I because of my water cooler work, which is basically I have to look at all the state media and find the 10 most interesting news stories of the day, put it together, as I
Cool.
think where some of yours
Right.
came out of.
Right.
And so I have to look at, actually I enjoy looking at all of the Vermont state media, including a lot of the small papers. For example, the Journal Opinion over in Bradford. And most people outside of Bradford have never heard of the Journal Opinion
Right.
or the surrounding towns, but there it's a great community paper.
That's
okay?
great.
It's sort of like maybe the Montpelier Bridge would be in here, except perhaps even more influential. Anyway, they had a story on the Bradford School District and the Newberry School District voluntarily merged.
Were they one of the first ones? There were a couple in the beginning that just merged.
I
They
don't
didn't
know
go-
about
It
the
was,
timeline.
Yeah. Who was-
Chittenden East.
Oh, Chittenden East.
But they actually merged under the MUD model.
Oh, yes, we
instead
talked
of
about
the
that, right,
Act 46
right,
model.
right.
They still got the incentives though.
Yeah.
They got a waiver from the
That's
AOE.
good. Wow.
So they all voted for this with the understanding, they were assured by their school officials, that the school tax rate would only go up 2 or 3%. Cost of living, okay. Well,
Ta-da.
the first bill comes in double digits, 10, 11, 12%
Oh my
tax
God.
increase. And not only that, but when the voters and the school board members go to all the experts, the superintendent, the principals, et cetera, and say, what's going on here? They didn't know. And not only did they not know, but they couldn't begin to explain it. There's a quote here from the reporter. Her name is Lillian Gehagen. Quote, "A clear explanation was not available from district administrators who also admitted they were just as surprised as everyone else."
Lovely.
And then some higher level person goes on to say, well, it has something to do with the state's longitudinal system and calculation of equalized pupils, which even to the school board, they were going, what are you
What?
talking about?
Right.
So there is the, not only, it's insult to injury. The injury is we're getting killed on the taxes. The insult is you can't even tell us why
Right.
Well,
with this wonderful
that's been
system.
an
I
issue
can hazard
for
a guess
years.
as to what it was. Two things. First, it's probably they had a small school grant that went away. Second, the longitudinal system is a standardized system of accounting, which means someone was probably cooking the books in the old district. And so they weren't, the way that the tax rates work is it only applies to education spending. So if you can classify something as non-education spending, you can artificially reduce your school budget. You know who's really good at this? They're going to be mad that
You're
I say
on
this.
video. Just
Rutland City does a really
really?
good job of. They classify a whole bunch of stuff as non-education spending
Oh, no
because they can get away with it and because it lowers their tax rate.
Well, I have argued for years, if you look at what schools pay for, there's so much human services stuff in there, which in my mind should not be paid through the school, because the definition of property tax is about property tax, the cost of, not the clothing for the kids and all this stuff. That should still be paid out of the Human Services General Fund. And you could cut property tax down in half a second by taking that stuff out.
Well,
and now, of course, it's robbing Peter to pay Paul, but you at least would have a good handle on how much it costs us for these human services things. Right now, you don't have a good idea.
Yeah, that's true. It's a little difficult to tell because so much, of our education resources are now being used for social services.
Right.
It's a little hard to, but things like free and reduced lunch is still federally funded. Like that's a very clear example of the funding stream is separate from your education costs.
They had done a study a couple of years ago. I made them put it in a bill we were working on to get that answer. And how much they came up with $58 million, and that was a very precursor, just kind of high level look. But you could take $58 million out of the total of property tax. That would cut your rate down a little bit.
50 million.
58. Just get it right up there. 60.
It's still less than 1%.
Yes, I know. but at least when you bring it over to general fund, you know how much you're paying for that stuff.
Yeah,
I think there's
fair.
much more involved. They didn't. That's another story. They didn't do it.
The biggest thing.
Sorry, we have to let this.
The biggest thing is staff
time.
and expenses. That's really what salaries
it's
and benefits
salaries
are
and healthcare.
Yeah, salaries and benefits are the big.
So to close the loop on the court case and this thing over in Bradford, Newberry, one of the two towns, Bradford, is a town that's challenging Act 46 in court. They're one of Dave Kelly's towns. And a former school board chair of Newberry, who was not a big fan of the merger, said, "I'm not feeling really good about this. In Newberry, we're feeling the full brunt of this merger. The state didn't have the courtesy to inform us. This is not a way to build trust."
What did they do? That they just made it happen and didn't involve people?
Well, the tax bills came out.
Oh, the taxes.
He was talking about the tax bills,
right.
yeah. But apparently, yeah. So he said, this is the first real tangible result we get from the merger is a tax bill that's 3 to 4 times what they told us it would be.
Well, and that's after the incentives, right?
Don't know.
Yeah, because
I think that's right.
Yeah.
So you have down here on one of your notes about Washington Central merger, which is our backyard.
Right.
But Calais in particular, they got creamed, did they not? Because they had surplus, they had money in the bank for a rainy day fund, and they had to share that with the other towns, like Berlin.
Right.
And then they had to absorb part of our debt, and I think East Montpelier had a very high level of debt, and Calais. So I wonder how do you know how they came out?
I think they're not feeling good about it at all. Yes, you have a relatively wealthy town, East Montpelier, that had a lot of debt. Right. And relatively poor Calais had been very prudent all along, and they got hosed. Yep. And as the merger is, these town schools, the first ones that will be shutting down are the small ones with the low enrollments. Right. So Worcester and Calais are going to be the first ones to really feel the pain, right. And are already feeling the financial pinch. And they're just saying, this is not working out.
Yeah. Well, and that's another piece of David Kelly's argument is the transfer of monetary assets from one district to another.
I think that's terrible.
And that is,
it's ours.
Again, that would be like the state coming in and saying, oh, Burlington, you have $100 million in reserve funds.
We'll help.
We're going to transfer that, and we're going to break it up, and Rutland's going to get some, and Montpelier is going to get some, and St. Albans is going to get some.
Hey, it's just wrong.
You can imagine how that would go over.
It's wrong. Taking Calais' slush fund or whatever, fund for the rainy day, right. and then making us take on the East Montpelier. It's just wrong.
So I think, the other thing that this really does is that these mergers have moved forward. They all had to be, operational by August 1st of this year, right? Mm-hmm. So we're about, 4 months past that at this point. And while this court case is playing out, right, that could undo all of this. or a lot of it. So what happens if that if Dave Kelly wins that case and all these districts already have a budget together?
Right. And meanwhile, we have, let's not worry about the kids.
And now, like, they have to unwind this thing. We know what that looks like.
Yeah.
That happened in Maine, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
now, like, this is going to be, it's already a mess. It has the potential to become more of a mess.
Yeah, Maine, you know, is backing out. They did all this, they've had it. They don't like it at all, and now they're trying to unwind it and get back to their town schools.
I didn't know that.
And it's just a nightmare up there. And you know, we camped this summer in Maine, and every place you go, I swear, you're out to dinner, you can hear somebody talk. Every night there'd be somebody talking about the school and what a mess it is, because it's really complicated.
Yeah, it's really complicated, and you can't like just hit the reset button and go back. There's a whole lot of, you know, Calais may not get their fund back.
Well, that's a lawsuit again waiting to happen. That's their money.
Yeah, but I mean, legally, it's like, you know, it's like an annulment.
But they could have done it in 2 tiers, like in Berlin. This tier is our debt, and that's a separate line item, and then the merger is here. But you can do it in a double tier. A is you know, you pay A for the bankers. We voted. Nobody else voted to accept that for the school reconstruction.
You can do that by transferring the assets or the debt to the town, right? So that's against the town, but that's assuming that your town boundaries fall within your school district boundaries, and that's not always the case.
Well, I think we should have done something like that. Do you ever attend any of the Berlin meetings? I was for a while, but then my summer got in the way.
Just the town meetings.
Yeah, just town meetings. Yeah. Because I think the worst thing in all of this, well, 2 worst things, is giving the new superintendency all of our land for $1. And when Barry Town had 3 official votes, posted, warned, technically a vote where you write on a piece of paper yes or no about the merger, 3 times everybody voted no, and the school board said, tough darts. I don't understand how you can have a vote that's legally binding, is it not? To them, apparently.
It's simply the
depends on how it's worded. It depends on how the vote is worded. The question on the ballot.
Well, I think everybody assumed it was if we vote no, it's not going to happen.
With energy, with schools, with almost anything that really matters to Montpelier, we're making the decisions.
Right.
And you can vote on whatever you want, but which I think.
So why embarrass the people and even have a vote? That's almost like just throwing in your eye or something.
Same thing happened with Stowe and.
Well, they lied to Stowe. That was an out and out.
Well, but they still voted. They voted it down twice.
Yep.
Stowe and Morrisville and Elmore, all 3 towns voted no twice, and
they accepted their alternative. They out and out accepted it, and then at the last minute they said no. This isn't
the alternative. They did approve an alternative governance structure that allows Stowe to still operate independently. Right.
But then they went, just kidding.
The Agency of Education said, yep, that's fine. And then the State Board of Education said no, we're going to force you to merge.
So, you know, this gives you a headache because it's just wrong. And whatever David's doing, I just thank him for that, because they can't be that stubborn, that they can't do things that I think are illegal. But anyway, what are you going to do?
Let's talk about Water Cooler a little bit. We talked about headliners earlier. Water Cooler is a news aggregation site.
Yes.
What is the idea behind it? What's the goal of Water Cooler? And you talked a little bit about, you know, you're looking at all of this news across Vermont. Like, what kind of news are you looking for?
30 years as a journalist, you get a sense of what I call a nose for news, which is people will pick up the paper and go, holy cow, that's what I want. I want 10 holy cow stories in Water Cooler. Don't know if I hit it all the time, but that's what I'm shooting for. And they can be funny, holy cow. They can be, oh my gosh, that's awful, holy cow. Or they can be just something that is clearly, wow, this is important, and I want to read more, and I want to comment on this too. That's another thing.
Well, that's the thing you have to talk about, the ability to comment.
We have it's a comment inclusive zone. There's no political ideology or anything that is, no, we're not going to let that on our website, as perhaps does happen, we're told,
Yes,
on some
right.
others.
It does.
I make sure that there's no racial stuff or really terrible personal attacks or anything like that. Anything that's really just, in terms of taste, is just out of bounds.
Right.
But the ideology and everything, that's all free.
That's
and we
great.
get people from all over the place commenting on it. And
'Cause I
so
think
far they like it.
People feel like they need to comment.
Yes.
I mean, people, that's something I think is lacking. How do you get your voice heard?
Yes.
So that's a great service.
That's right. And we live in a media world that sometimes we feel like it's all coming at us, and there's no way to really
Right.
speak back.
Right.
That is meaningful. And Water Cooler does that.
And it's also like, I think, a cross section of different types of news. Because there's stuff in there that's national stuff that maybe showed up in CNN that has something to do with Vermont.
Right.
Whether it's a story about Bernie Sanders' campaign or Joe Biden visiting Burlington, like whatever it is. Like there's an interesting cross. But
Or
then it's
thinking he was visiting.
Or thinking he was visiting. That I saw that story too.
Yeah.
There's like 3 different times he
I
thought he was.
love Vermont. Here I am in Keene, New Hampshire. I love visiting Vermont.
Yeah.
Wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe you look similar. Who knows?
Well, yeah. I mean,
Well.
you're kind of close. Keene's not that far away.
No, it's not.
It's not.
But also like hyperlocal stuff.
Yes.
There's a new publication I think that I learned about. It's like hyperlocal.
Yeah,
what is
Spot
it
On.
called?
I think it's called.
Spot On.
Yeah, is that the one? And there's also a Herecast. Oh, Herecast over in White River Junction. It's all online, and there's a crime reporter. I think Francis is his last name, and anything that's going on with crime or just happening on the streets, he is right there with pictures and coverage on it in White River Junction and the Upper Valley. It's really
Nice.
great.
Well, I bet people be interested in that.
The same day that the F-35 protesters were out, thumping the tub for their thing, I think it was on 9/11, there was a spontaneous gathering of people on the streets of White River Junction holding up signs saying, "God bless our firefighters." We love you.
Good for them.
Yeah, and it was just the signs and everything. I was just like, wow. So that made Water
That's
Cooler,
great.
you bet.
Yeah.
I think that's great. And so, what did you say the new one is going to do? I got it backwards. The Chronicle of the State House of Vermont.
Sure.
Right?
Sure, close enough.
Close enough.
Chronicle of the Vermont State House.
Vermont.
We actually did it for sort of a pilot for 4 issues last year, and it comes out twice a month. And what it really is a community newspaper for the Vermont State House community. We have pro and cons. We have news about legislators, what's going on in their lives,
Right.
a little bit on the lobbyists.
Nice.
Letters to the editor from Vermonters saying, you legislators, we wish you would think about this. And we intentionally send out hard copies to every select board and school board member that we have on a list, because
Excellent.
we want the people who are running local government to know what is happening in Montpelier, and for them to be able to respond to that because of that
Right.
same problem we
Well,
were just
for
talking
sure.
about.
Yeah. Do you know, this is just how Vermonters react sometimes. One of my requirements at DMV, which is right across the street from the state, is that every new employee had to take a tour of the State House, and I would take them. You have no idea. One woman who's just a super lady, she was a nervous wreck. I'm walking over with her, and she is just so nervous to go into the State House. And I said,
Wow.
I forget what her first name was, but anyway, Lucy. I said, what? I said, wow, this is our State House, and I don't know what to expect. They've never been there. They have
Right.
no idea how to use the State House, the internet.
Right.
And there's everything you could want to know is right there, but they
Sure.
don't know how to use it. And it's a little mysterious, sort of, so they're a little reluctant to go up there.
Can be intimidating
Yeah.
until you realize that it's just the people's house.
Oh, exactly.
It's
Right.
their house.
Yeah.
I'll sometimes give tours to 10th and 11-year-old kids.
Oh, nice.
and I'll tell them all about why Abraham Lincoln grew his beard, because a little girl in New York said, "Hey, Mr. Lincoln, you ought to grow your beard." And from that moment on, he starts growing
cool.
it. Yeah, and I'll tell them, this is a bunch of old people here, but you're the future of the state. And so really, you should be telling us what you think ought to happen, because it's your state, it's your house. Speak up.
Good for you. That's great. That's great. Anyway, so listen, I know on something we should be talking about, we talked about it right before the show, was talking about Charlie, speaking of schools. Tell folks about his latest,
Sure.
Charlie Papillo.
I mean, that man is just too much.
Charlie Papillo used to be, for those of you, from the Chittenden County area, had a great talk show, morning talk show, called Charlie and Ernie. And everyone wanted to be in his show, but you had to bring donuts. This man is a gifted talk show host.
Right.
And so what he's doing, in the spirit of John Steinbeck's book, Travels with Charlie, is what it was called. John Steinbeck, the great author, drove around the country in a truck with his poodle, and he just talked to people. In every state, he'd go in and he'd meet someone and he'd tell the story of conversations he had with people. And what Charlie Papillo is doing is he's traveling around the state of Vermont, meeting people and getting two people of different views together on hot button issues, getting them together to talk about their issue. For example, the last one was at the Elmore Schoolhouse, the one-room schoolhouse.
Right.
The last one.
Yes.
Still in operation.
Is it in operation?
Yeah. Well,
that's
part
amazing.
of it currently is, yes. It's part of the Morrisville School District now, but yes.
Right. And he had the Secretary of Education, Dan French, and a local school board member, Jay Eshelman, sitting at a table together talking, and while they were talking, they were building a 9th grade science project of making a tower out of sticks and marshmallows.
Oh, cool.
So here they are, they finally do it, and theirs is taller than the kids next to them, and they do a fist bump, and it's
very nice.
So the whole idea of it is, and it's not to set up confrontation, it's to get a difficult issue and for people to sit down and talk about it like respectful adults. And Charlie makes sure that they do.
Which we have lost that ability. It's very bad.
But every episode, I did one with Mike Donahue. Mike Donahue and I talked about the press.
Yeah, the state of media in Vermont.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And Mike was the gruff old veteran police reporter at the Free Press when I was an intern in 1979. Yeah. So he and I have had some history there.
We had Mike and Steve Pappas.
Oh, that must have been
and
great.
they were great.
Yeah. We need to have them back and to keep talking. We were talking about freedom of speech.
Yeah, and we're talking about that
Wow.
reporters aren't reporters anymore. They are commentators, and they should just say that they're commentators, because then you, as the reader, can say, "Well, that's his opinion. Now, what do I think?" Don't you think so? And they agree that there's not too many reporters left.
It's
anymore.
really true. And I think a lot of that is click-driven. It's because everything is on the internet, and they need those quick responses. That's where the money is. So therefore, opinion, they play to their audience,
well,
inevitably. And I will admit, I've got a point of view, and I'm very upfront about it. And and the difference is I'm not pretending to be...
no, you're saying what it is, and I think reporters should do that.
Right.
Because I can only think of two reporters that are straight-out reporters that just report, regardless of yes or no, or they just report.
Can
the
I
rest
ask you
always,
who?
Oh, not in public. I don't
Closely guarded secrets
closely guarded,
here.
just for me. But my favorite reporter of all time was Lewis Porter. I had no idea what he thought about issues until after when he came to work for the state. And I told him, and I said, "You were so impressive," because I would read an article and it was just the truth.
Good.
I mean, it was just what was or what is. And he was a great reporter. But there are two others that are sort of floating around just like Lewis.
He's doing a good job now with Fish and Wildlife, too.
Yeah, he's doing a great job with that. Yeah.
So
I like Lewis.
I just want to ask you, you put down something, I don't know where this came from. It said legislation could put college sex abuse discipline on school. What is that?
Yes.
Please, I hope I'm not reading this wrong.
No, there is a campus sex abuse panel meeting. That's one of those summer groups that I mentioned.
Here in Vermont?
Here in Vermont. They're meeting, I believe, next week. at the State House, and they meet. No, I'm sorry, they meet at UVM.
Oh.
And the idea is there's obviously a problem with sex abuse on campus. And what do we do about that? And some people want some legislation that would make it that any student who is disciplined for sex abuse, that goes on his college transcript. Oh. Essentially, his permanent record.
His life.
Yes. And there's real pros and cons of that. The pro is, hey, we got to protect victims of sex abuse, and perhaps it is a just thing if you commit a sex crime to have it go on your, if you really did it, right? The argument against it, one is more from the victims, that there's the feeling that if they know they're going to be inflicting such a lifelong punishment, perhaps they'll be hesitant to go forward. Even though something really did happen, they'll be hesitant to go forward and do it, perhaps fearing repercussions. And the other one is from the point of view of the alleged perpetrator. There probably have been a few times when people are accused of sex crimes when really there was anger coming from another place. The accusation was from perhaps a jilted lover or something.
And no intent to help these people, just to put it on their transcript?
Well, good question. And so they're grappling with all that right now. It's not a black and white, we're going to smash them in the head or whatever. They're trying to come up with something that is fair and comprehensive. But obviously everyone has a point of view too. And there's one of the driving forces is a woman who was a victim of a sex crime. And she has a understandable point of view on this issue, zero tolerance on this issue. Right. And there are others who say, yes, that was awful, but we need to, there are lives here, and what if someone's falsely accused? So it's a tough one.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have a criminal justice system that does something like that. It doesn't put it on a college transcript, right? But you have a criminal record that will follow you if, there are findings.
Right, and there's that sex offender list.
Yeah, there's sex offender registry.
And, you get on that, and you're on that forever, right? I mean, that follows you forever. Yeah, I think.
I'm not sure all of these people would be going through a court system. It might be something that is just done in a college disciplinary process. Some of them, yes, it might be court, but some of them may just be, we're just doing this in a college. So therefore, should a college be? How should we handle that?
Same problem. What I think. I think that's not their role.
In a quasi-judicial type of way?
Yes, they're not trained for that.
Yes, quasi-judicial, good way to put it.
And do they have required training for these people to make such a determination?
Oh, here's the thing, is that the person who is doing the intake on the accusation and is doing the investigation is also the person delivering the decision. So you don't have police, prosecutor, judge. That's all one person.
One person.
Yeah, that's definitely a conflict.
Betsy DeVos,
like
the federal education secretary, has come out against that in particular, saying, look, this is a flaw in this system. Yes, we need to do something about it, but that's too fraught to do that.
Yeah.
Right. So there could be so many, dare I say, politics.
Well, too many potential things that can go wrong in that scenario.
What if, God forbid, the person is innocent and it was it was something done to him because somebody was mad at him or something? I mean, what if it didn't happen?
Right. That you hope in a regular court system there are checks and balances, and that the standard of proof is so high. In a system like this,
it's not so high, and it could be who you know and who you are and all that stuff. That would be bad. Oh, I don't like that at all.
Yeah, I could
see
problems with that.
Is this a bill that's out there that they're looking at?
The study committee is considering proposing a bill.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Have to check that out.
That would be House Judiciary.
That's just wrong.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
And there's several members on House Judiciary who are essentially, they're from the Burlington district. They're in very close with UVM. Yeah. So the feeling is there probably would be some push on that committee to get it through.
In our system, there's an avenue for appeal, and to have a second hearing, and if new evidence. I mean, what do you do 5 years later, and
Right.
they don't even know you anymore or whatever, and you got to go back to them.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
just bad. Boy. Well, another show. I've got a long list of topics.
Yeah.
So, what do you think from we've been talking about education and kind of going from here to there. What do you think will happen this session, if anything, on Act 46, on any tweaks or whatever they're going to do? Or are they waiting for the Supreme Court?
You know, I do think, at the very least, Pat, they're waiting to see what the courts do.
Right, and that's just November, you said. Maybe.
The next stage is November,
Yeah.
and you know when the Supreme Court issues a decision, that's always up to them. I don't know, probably
Well,
early next year
In
sometime.
Brigham, it was like middle of February or something.
Right. Right.
Which definitely threw a monkey wrench into the legislative
well,
session.
you can't do this in the middle of the school year, for heaven's sake. No one talks about the kids.
Yes, they can. They can, and they probably will.
I mean, the kids have been tossed around here. I'm sure they're wondering where they're going to be going to school and taking bus rides. And
Well, I think for this year, it's probably already set. Like, if there's a plan in place, they're probably not deviating from it. Where they go next year, it's probably a different
And
question.
you mentioned the buses.
yeah,
The fewer buildings you have, the longer bus rides you have. That's just geometry, right? And one of the things that the state's working on right now is a carbon tax and something that isn't a carbon tax, but it might as well be a carbon tax.
Right.
So school districts already paying a ton for
For
fuel
sure.
and gasoline because of the extra distances and because of the whatever gets passed for carbon taxation. Wow, is that cost going to go up? So,
we
just one
had
thing
somebody
to
on the
think
show. I forget who it was, who said that there is not a bus company large enough. Oh, it was up in Lamoille.
No, in the Kingdom. It was the
Yeah, it was up in the Kingdom, and the guy said, given the land that they have to
Yeah.
cover, there's not one bus company that can cover the whole superintendency, and so they have to contract with smaller different groups, smaller different bus companies, and that will add to the cost and the complexity of it, because it's not just one, you go here, you go there, you got to coordinate, and he said it's going to be a nightmare and it's going to be costly.
So speaking of busing impacts on carbon emissions, guess what is exempt from carbon pollution
What?
requirements?
What, state
The
treasurer?
EPA level. School buses
Oh, really? And they're the worst.
are exempt from emission standards.
Oh, that's right, Ben.
Yeah.
You're right.
So they have no catalytic, they're diesel engines with no catalytic converter on them that are spewing straight carbon monoxide into the atmosphere.
I got into trouble because I voted that they should do something about the emissions, turning the buses off, because my grandson had said something we were talking about. He says, every time I go by there, it makes me cough for the longest time. I went, all right, that's it.
Yeah.
Well,
And that's largely because, and you can see it too. Like you're driving behind a school bus, and where the tailpipe comes
Right.
out, it's all black.
Right.
And it's because of all this particulate pollution that's coming out of those tailpipes.
so why would they exempt that as cost to the...
Cost
Cost.
reasons. Yeah, those catalytic converters. They have. Oh God, what do they have in them? It's they have some rare earth metals in them, so they cost like thousands of dollars.
Oh, great.
And that's why they are exempted
Lovely.
for school buses, because it drives the cost up.
Lovely.
Yeah.
So, but our
Can't make
education...
school buses more expensive.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we have, that's the seatbelt issue. That always drives me crazy. What was I trying to say? Oh, on the school bus issue, this guy was saying that, and I think we're seeing it now, is just going to be much more costly than it is now because of coordination of the new superintendencies.
Right.
So I don't know what people are going to do, because you got to get the kids here or there.
Yeah.
Yep.
But anyway.
So, Guy, in all of the, monitoring that you do of Vermont media, have you seen any trends in the last couple of years that you've kind of noticed as something either out of the ordinary or something that's notable?
That's good.
The rise of homelessness.
Oh, interesting.
Not that it hasn't ever been there, but in Brattleboro, oh my gosh, are they having problems down there? They're having people panhandling, businesses closing, saying it's these panhandlers that are contributing
because they're
to
in the
us
front of their
closing.
buildings. Right.
And sleeping on the park benches, urinating and defecating over everything. They've installed $1,000 a month, 3 porta potties in the park for $1,000 a month, still happening. A real problem down there that they're trying to grapple with homelessness. And yet they have this, we need to be compassionate, we need to be understanding thing. This is happening in Montpelier also, where Montpelier opened up its homeless shelter a month early because of the greater number of panhandlers. And I do see a growing concern in, perhaps not everywhere in the state, but in places like Milton and Colchester. There's a cemetery in Colchester where homeless people are just sort of squatting there. And a lot of it has to do, of course, with the high cost of housing, but it also has to do with the opiate problem, mental health, and just there's a real fear out there that Vermont could, be going the way of San Francisco. On the other hand, there's also that no one wants to be the bad guy who maybe does something that looks like it's not affirming and accepting. So we're not in a mental space right now to be able to sort of grapple with this as a problem like any other.
Are there statistics out there? There must be, about whether they're young people on opioids or old people who have just hit upon hard times, or do you have any idea of what the breakdown is of age?
Right. Last year, they do, once a year, they do a count on a given night. And last year, if I remember right, in Lamoille County, the biggest growth area was in children, because you had families who were, and so from different counties, it's way up. Some counties, it's actually down. And that's just a random snapshot of one night. So it's really sort of hard to say.
That's tragic, because I know in Barrie, a lot of the churches open up for the homeless, and they try to share it amongst the churches, because, but sometimes they have overflow that the churches can only handle by fire code X number of people, and sometimes they have overflow and don't know where to send those people. So that's pretty awful.
Yeah, that's tough. And even the whole like the Burlington City Hall Park, for example, that whole scenario where there's homeless people basically protesting because this is where they hang out most of the time.
Leave us alone.
And they're displaced because the whole park is under construction right now.
A couple of years ago, there was a piece of legislation called the Homeless Bill of Rights that a Waterbury rep and a chair of a committee was put forth, and it didn't succeed. They held hearings, but it didn't succeed because the business community people were saying, this would seem to enable, empower, and legalize panhandling and other sort of undesirable activity. And so it failed, and that chairman was very, very angry. I remember seeing him in the State House cafeteria going, I can't believe they did that. He was just outraged. Now, in Water Cooler, I believe just today, the News and Citizen, there was the Morrisville town official who tweeted that these homeless people in the park are undesirable. They're undesirable people. Her job is now at risk because she tweeted that.
Yeah, she said that.
Yeah, and so, and on the one hand, perhaps that's unfeeling, and maybe that wasn't her position to say that. Maybe the select board people.
Because you really don't know their individual stories. I'm sure some of them are pretty, tug at your heart a little.
Right. And
and there, but by the grace of God.
Oh,
right.
Could
that's
be
right.
us.
Veterans coming back from the war who turned to drugs or alcohol. I mean, yes. On the other hand, there's also other people who are saying, I was thinking those words myself. I was thinking undesirable. So what are we going to do as a state about that? And I think that is going to be the next, at some point, the state's going to have to grapple with that with their eyes open and their hearts open as well.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And perhaps their wallets.
And yes, hearts, eyes, and wallets all open, unfortunately.
that the pictures of, is it San Francisco or, oh my
Right.
God, the streets, they're just
Right.
one after the other, tents, and there's all kinds of diseases
Right.
that we haven't seen in a while. They're all there.
Typhus.
The police, when they go to help, are getting some of these
Right.
diseases themselves. It's
Yeah.
pretty traumatic.
Right. And we're all sort of, it is traumatic, and we're sort of afraid, oh my gosh, could that be heading our way?
Yeah.
That obviously would be way, 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 way down the road. But on the other hand, maybe we are going that direction, so what do we do?
I don't know, because I know in Barrie, when I worked for the town, there are some businesses that escort their employees out to the parking lot.
Is that right?
Because
Wow.
they're probably, you don't know these people, and there is a preconceived notion of who they are, and maybe 80% of the time it's not true, but it's there. So,
Right.
and I think people by themselves, when they get approached for money and stuff, you got a little worried.
And you only have to have one incident to
Oh,
prove
right,
to prove
exactly.
the fear.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
You're right.
Right.
Anyway,
So-
it's really bad.
We've only got a couple minutes left. Guy, is there anything that we haven't covered that we should talk about?
Please tell people how to sign up to get your.
Oh, sure. Best thing to do is to go to the Facebook page, Vermont State House Headliners, and you can just sign up there.
Right.
That would be great. I don't know, Ben. Really, what we're missing? What's the big story coming around? Ask me another question.
Does carbon tax have a shot?
I doubt carbon tax does, but boy, this transportation and climate initiative, it's a multi-state
Right.
thing that it's the same thing as a carbon tax in terms of I'm going to go to the pump and I'm going to pay, well, in California it's 36 cents extra. And if all the gasoline and diesel fuel was taxed at that amount, that would raise $138 million. They'd take
Wow.
it from you and give it to the state for their renewable transportation programs. $138 million.
Wow.
That's if it's at California's rate of, I think
Right.
it was 36 cents. It could be more, it could be less.
Wonderful.
And it's a multi-state regional thing, so the legislature can almost say, well, it was their proposal, and yeah, I guess we'll give it a try, rather than being totally on the hook themselves.
I think the trouble
for a
is the
carbon
rural
tax.
nature of our
Well,
state.
a lot of people drive.
People drive from
terrible.
way up north to come work for the state.
Right.
I'm always surprised when I meet people from the state, when I work with them, where they drive in from every day. It's like, whoa, an hour, no
Yeah.
big
Right.
deal. They just drive.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Right.
So I hope you all check out Guy's newspapers. He really writes just beautifully. I don't know what the right words are, but it's understandable, and you really get a flavor for what's going on in Vermont. And I am going to start commenting on the
Good.
water cooler better than Facebook. Boy, you say something on Facebook, these people are crazy.
I'll say.
Spend my half a day unfriending. But anyway, thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Thank you, Guy, for being here.
Thank you.
Ben.
Of course.
See you next week. And in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites.